So we're going to start by just reading Job 19:24 to 27. This is the section in Job 19 where he talks about his hope, his great hope in the Redeemer. He says, verse 24, "Oh, that with an iron pen and lead they were engraved in the rock forever." He's talking about his words. "For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. My heart faints within me." So this is the big climax of this chapter. It's the high point of Job's hope, where he is thinking about his representation before God. And in previous chapters, he's thought about the Redeemer speaking for him in heaven. He's got an intercessor, a witness, a friend in heaven who will defend him before the justice seat of God and say that Job has not caused this sin and that he is innocent of that. But now he sees the Redeemer. He pictures him in another locale. He pictures the Redeemer as being on earth at the last. And what he means by at the last is probably on the last day or in the last time. So I think the proper understanding of what he's talking about here is on the last day, on the day of judgment, the Redeemer will stand, and Job himself will stand with that Redeemer face to face. And he, Job, will be in his own flesh, which he has already confessed is, falling apart and going to die any minute. And so he is anticipating here a bodily resurrection where he gets to stand with his Redeemer and having been vindicated before before God. And this just overwhelms him with such emotion and such joy, that's what the "my heart faints within me" at the end is all about. It's a beautiful picture. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what a Redeemer is. And I think we had some discussion about this last week. And I've had a whole bunch of notes on that in the outline, and I've basically replaced them all with a shorter section because the notes that I had previously were talking about the particular word for Redeemer that Job is using here. And I was focusing on that. But as it turns out that there's a word group of three different words that are used and translated Redeemer, redemption, redeem in the Old Testament, and they're all considered to be synonymous or very close to synonyms, have a lot of overlap. And those words in all of the Hebrew lexicons, they're all treated together, even though they're not next to each other in the alphabet. They're all like, if you're looking at this word, you got to look at these other two words too to get the full picture. So I wanted to kind of do that. So I wanted to start by defining what redeem is in the biblical usage. To redeem. So to redeem is to release someone upon the payment of the ransom price. So there's something that has been caught, captured, or is in slavery, or is in the possession of somebody else, and you have to pay a price to get it back. And so to redeem somebody or to redeem something, because in the Bible, both things and people, both property and persons, can be redeemed, you have to pay a price. And there's theological reasons for that as well as sociological reasons. But so again, to redeem is to release someone upon the payment of the ransom price. And immediately, you think of Christ and our redemption. And he redeems us from something by paying the price. The price is his perfect obedience and his taking a place of punishment for our sins. And we were enslaved to sin, the devil. We were facing the wrath of God and liable to punishment, and he releases us, frees us from all of that. And all of these Old Testament pictures are pointing ultimately forward to that. So the first word that we want to look at is jail or Gael. Not sure how to pronounce it, and it's spelled differently in different sources. But it's the word here that Job is using in verse 25 when he says, "I know that my Redeemer lives." And it's the word that's used in Ruth for Boaz, the kinsman redeemer. And it usually is used in situations where we're talking about the redemption of some inheritance, like your property, you sell your house, then you need to redeem it back, or your property gets sold or traded away or taken, you need to get it back. It also talks about persons who have sold themselves into slavery. They're redeemed, and the word used usually is this one that is being used by uh, Job here. It's also the word used when God talks about redeeming his people out of slavery in Egypt. So we're not talking about just personal slavery where you're working for somebody, but this idea of belonging to another. God uses that word to describe that. So I wanted to look at a couple of passages about that so we can get the feel for that. So Leviticus 25, on the outline, it says 25, 23 to 35. That's all about the redemption of inheritance, land or houses. But verse 25, Leviticus 25, 25 kind of sums it up. If your brother becomes poor and sells part of his property, then his nearest redeemer shall come and redeem what his brother has sold. So it's pretty self-explanatory. The nearest redeemer is his not geographically nearest, but closest relative, his relative who is close to him. So maybe a brother, maybe an uncle, something like that will come and redeem him. So this is a kinsman redeemer, is what this is. And it's protection of the family's property, the family's inheritance, their land and their houses. So that's just a good example of what this word is usually used like. The same idea is in Proverbs 23, 10 and 11, where it says, do not move an ancient landmark or enter the fields of the fatherless, for their Redeemer is strong. He will plead their cause against you. So the fatherless, the orphans here, the fatherless have no redeemer. Well, they have a redeemer, but it's this is expanding on the kinsman redeemer and saying that their redeemer, who in this passage is God, is strong, and it's in the context of moving an ancient landmark, making the property of the poor or the needy smaller, their inheritance diminished. And so God says, no, I'm going to take care of that. I assure that their inheritance is safe with me. And I said this also has to do with persons being sold into slavery. You look at Leviticus 25, 47 to 54. If a stranger or a sojourner with you becomes rich, and your brother beside him becomes poor, and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner with you or to a member of the stranger's clan, then after he is sold, he may be redeemed. One of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle or his cousin may redeem him, or a close relative from his clan may redeem him. Or if he grows rich, he may redeem himself. He shall calculate with his buyer from the year when he sold himself to him until the year of Jubilee, and the price of his sale shall vary with the number of years. The time he was with his owner shall be rated as the time of a hired worker. If there are still many years left, he shall pay proportionally for his redemption some of his sale price. If there remain but a few years until the year of Jubilee, he shall calculate and pay for his redemption in proportion to his years of service. He shall treat him as a worker hired year by year. He shall not rule ruthlessly over him in your sight. And if he is not redeemed by these means, then he and his children with him shall be released in the year of Jubilee. I wanted to read the whole section, including the bit about the year of Jubilee, and calculating the sale price and all that, and what happens if he's not able to be redeemed before the year of Jubilee. I wanted to read that all because it has typological significance. Those people who are not redeemed by any other means, God declares redeemed in the year of Jubilee. They were unable to redeem themselves. They didn't have a kinsman redeemer who paid for them. They couldn't pay their debts off. God redeems them in the year of Jubilee. That's significant because when Jesus comes and reads in the out of the scroll of Isaiah in Capernaum in his first appearance in his public ministry, he reads a passage which announces that it is the year of Jubilee. And that's the whole point of that passage from Isaiah 61 that he reads, that this is the year of the Lord's favor. It is the year of Jubilee. And he says, today this has become fulfilled in your hearing. And so he comes to set free those who could not be redeemed and were not redeemed under the old system. And that would be every one of us, every one of his people. So persons who sold themselves into slavery, Leviticus 25, and then also Exodus 6:6. Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. So the word he's using there is the same word that we use in Ruth or that is used in Ruth for kinsman redeemer. It's the same word that we've been looking at so far in the other passages. And here, the slavery is slavery to, in Egypt, right? Not just slavery to your neighbor, but now the whole country of them is enslaved, and the Lord is going to deliver them, and he's going to be their redeemer. He will redeem them. And so we see the Bible itself is teaching that God is going to redeem his people. We start off with the first usage of the text and of the term, and it's basically, person to person, property and people and things like that. But as we move through, or even contemporary with the Leviticus passage, we're going to have these passages in Exodus about God redeeming his people from slavery. And we're going to start also seeing passages where God redeems his people from sin and from death and other things like that. So redemption takes on or becomes defined in the Bible as this very broad concept. And we don't, I don't think we don't get, I'm certain we don't get the full implications of the meaning of what's going on if we just stick to one of the three words and go, no, Job is using this word kinsman redeemer. We have to stick with that because the Bible itself, as I'll show in a minute, actually uses these three different words synonymously. They overlap. So, so where are we now? There we are, Genesis 48. So anybody have anything you want to say at this point? Going to still be, go ahead. I thought I heard Susan say something.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had to log out and log back in, but no, I didn't have a question.
Okay, no worries. No worries. Okay. So we're going to continue then talking about this word for redeemer that is the same word in Ruth, kinsman redeemer. In Genesis 48, 15, and 16, I want to show, and what I've been trying to show is just the range of usage, how it's being used, what kind of context it's talking about. Genesis 48, 15, and 16, Jacob says, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys, and in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. So Jacob prays that the Lord would redeem, or has redeemed, Jacob all his days from evil. And he prays that this Redeemer would also bless his children. So redeem from evil, this is a slightly different context than redeeming from having to sell your property and then buying it back, or even like with Ruth, her future among the people of God is jeopardized. Her carrying on of her husband's and her family name is jeopardized by the death of her husband. And so this is redeemed by Boaz, but this here is evil. Jacob says, God has redeemed me from evil, bad things that have happened to him, or potentially could have happened to him. We see that same thing in Isaiah 35:9, where it talks about the highway of the Lord. No lion shall be there, nor shall any ravenous beast come up on it. They shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. So it's just general evil, general bad things that might befall you that is being talked about here. The redeemed of the Lord. They're redeemed from these things that just might happen. Lions and tigers and bears, better watch out. Uh, Psalm 103:4. Praise to God who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with steadfast love and mercy. This is death. Redeems your life from death. So we've got the things that we're redeemed from, that God redeems his people from, is it just expanding more death? And then the last one is Isaiah 44:21 and 22. Isaiah 44:21 and 22. Remember these things, O Jacob and Israel, for you are my servant. I formed you. You are my servant. O Israel, you will not be forgotten by me. I have blotted out your transgressions like a cloud and your sins like mist. Return to me, for I have redeemed you. Now, I think that that's the first thing we think of when we think of redemption. We think of sin, right? God has redeemed us from sin. So it's just to challenge you that as you're reading through, particularly Isaiah and the Old Testament, that when you come across redeem or redemption or deliver, you want to look at what's the context, what are we being delivered from, what is the redemption being applied to. A lot of times in the redeeming, in Isaiah in particular, the redemption being spoken of is their deliverance out of Babylon. He's going to redeem them by delivering them out of Babylon. But, and I'm not saying we want to say, oh no, that only means that. What I'm saying is that that is a picture. It is that they were delivered from Babylon, but that also is a picture of deliverance from death and sin and evil and, deliverance from losing your inheritance in the Lord. And, all of those things are part and parcel of being redeemed. So we want to be thinking, uh, holistically, right? We want to be thinking completely about what the biblical picture is giving us and seeing that even though one thing might be emphasized in one text and another thing in a different text, that they're all really talking about the same thing, the restoration and the freedom that are given to us in Christ, that belong to God's people through Christ. So that is not just sin, but it's much wider than just that. It's all sin and all of its effects, all the effects of rebellion and disharmony and all of that. So that's the first word of the three words in the word group. And that word is, again, jail or Gale. Don't know how to say it. The next word is probably pronounced Peda or Peda. It applies to redemption of the first. Sorry, Catherine?
Yes, please. Would you spell that word?
Yes, P-A.
You just said the Hebrew?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
P-A-D-A-H. P-A-D-A-H. 5 letters.
D as in David, E-H?
A-H. Yeah.
A-H. I'm sorry.
No, you got it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this one has to do with all of the passages that talk about redeeming the firstborn. And we'll just look at one passage for that. That's Exodus 13:13. Every firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb, or if you will not redeem it, you shall break its neck. Every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem. So this is paying a price for the firstborn rather than sacrificing them. And so it's part of the redeem word group. We see that it's being translated redeem right there in the passage. So this has with it the idea of substitution. The firstborn is dedicated to God, should be killed and sacrificed, but instead they're redeemed. And so there's an exchange. The last one is spelled K-A-P-H-A-R. So that's K A-P-H-A-R. And this is sometimes or a lot of times translated atone, to atone. And it means to cover over, to atone, or to make expiation. And it's used in context, a lot of context, where the restoration of our relationship to God is the thing that is in view. So we have all of the passages about the mercy seat. That word mercy is this word that we're talking about. And I'm just going to read Exodus 25, 21, and 22. And you shall put the mercy seat on the top of the ark, and in the ark you shall put the testimony that I shall give you. And there I will meet with you, and from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim that are on the ark of the testimony, I will speak with you about all that I will give you in commandment for the people of Israel. So this mercy seat is the place where God will meet with his people. And it's obviously, I know everybody's probably had lots of teaching on the mercy seat and the furniture in the tabernacle and the significance of it. But one of the basic significances of the mercy seat is that God's entire dealing with us as redeemed people is on the basis of his mercy. The mercy seat signifies the blood spilt for the redemption of sin. And you can see how many times I'm saying redeemed and redemption in just the explanation. This is very central to our redemption, is the mercy of God and the blood that was spilt for that as an expression of that mercy. And so that's one of the usages of that third word. The other one is atonement. Leviticus 16:6, this chapter is about the Day of Atonement. Just one usage here. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering for himself and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. So atonement is the making right of the relationship between man and God that has been fractured and destroyed basically because of man's sin, by covering over that sin by the offering. So atonement is what is then done or made. And this is also said to be for sin in Psalm 65:3. When iniquities prevail against me, you atone for our transgressions. That's the same word out of the three words in the word group. When iniquities prevail against me, you atone for our transgressions. God atones for the transgressions of his people. Clearly a Christological reference there. And what I want to just point out at this point, just in addition, is that a few minutes ago I read from Isaiah 44, where God said that he redeemed us. And what he said was, I have blotted out your transgressions and your sins. I have redeemed you. And that was in the first word of that was in the jail word, right? The first word of the three words in the word group. And now we're looking at the third word in the word group, and it's talking about sins, right? Psalm 65:3, when iniquities prevail against me, you atone for our transgressions. So there's, this is a synonymous usage of those two words. And you can find examples. I found examples for every one of them where it's being used with another, like two of the same words, or there are three usages. Usage 1 and 2 in the same verse. Usage 1 and 3 in the same verse. Usage 2 and 3 in the same verse as synonymous. So they're synonymous. So lost my place on my outline. Here's one place where usage is 2 and 3. So I just showed that 1 and 2 are used synonymously. You can see it, conceptually there. But here's a place where word 2 and 3 are used in the same sentence, and you can see their synonyms. Exodus 21:30. If a ransom, that's word number 2, padah. If a ransom is imposed on him, then he shall give for the redemption, word number 3, kafar, he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is imposed on him. So if a ransom is imposed on him, he will give the ransom for whatever is imposed on him. So we have synonymous usage. So these are all seen by people who study the words as being in the same kind of word group. They're in the same word group, and that they have overlapping or synonymous meanings. And so when we think about them, we want to think about them together, not separately. The other thing that I'll just mention, that I don't have any passages to show you right now, but any passage in the New Testament that uses the word redemption and is quoting or summarizing or, referring to an Old Testament passage, I guess I'll say it like this. In the New Testament, there's one word that is being used every time. And that one word is being used to translate each of these three words. So that was kind of the quick word study. What do we get from that? Anything pop out at you?
Oh, everything. It's remarkable. It's just remarkable. I'm never not amazed. I am always amazed and so thankful. Because I remember briefly our conversation last week when I read you really briefly the slight sentences at the bottom of the page, and I mentioned Goel, or however you say that, in regard to my Redeemer. And wow, it's like, it's an explosion of, what? What's the word? It's just wonderful. It's just thrilling. I mean, my goodness, Chuck. I'm not excited. I'm just, wow, yes, I am. So thank you. Thank you.
It is, I can say that you have really understood, right? You've really understood the significance of these things. And that is something that I hope that all of us, understand and feel in the depths of our hearts, because the redemption we have is so broad and covers so much, and is all the work of God, as these texts. I love that. One of my favorite texts when I was studying this was, if he can't pay for himself and he's still a slave in the year of redemption, God will redeem him. He'll be set free.
Amen.
There's hope for every single person, right? That's what that says. Awesome.
Yeah.
So just this one observation of, like, I see that these are all, as you presented, they're essentially synonyms, right? But I find it interesting that I'm not sure exactly what the grammatical sort of word for this is, but it's interesting that the word for, like, redeem, you have redeem, and then so that gal word, and then kafar is to atone, but they're essentially used synonymously. They're interchangeable. But if you look at them, there's in a sense, there's like a cause and effect relationship between those two, right? So an act of atonement has the effect of redeeming whoever it was done whoever was the object of that atonement. So the fact that they're used interchangeably means sometimes the thing is being described by its cause and sometimes by its effect. And so I guess that what I draw from that is that, like, anytime we see a word and it's we read it as atone or make expiation or cover over, then we know that it's not just an act of atonement, but that there is a redemption that's happening as part of it. So there's a redemption with it, and the inverse, or the vice versa as well. Anytime that we see that redemption has been stated as, like, somebody has been redeemed or something has been redeemed or saved or delivered, that there was behind that, there was some atonement that brought that to happen.
Hmm. Good observation. I was thinking about that. I couldn't express it, but I was thinking about the same type of thing. I realized that one was talking about the person doing the action, and the other was talking about the result of that action.
Hmm.
And yeah, so right. And so when there is an act of atonement, it also implies there is a redeemer, right?
Yeah, a redeemer and somebody being redeemed.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
And then every time when it says like
Mhm.
another synonymous word that's used is deliverance, and it's actually
Hmm.
you'll see it these words translated as deliverance or deliverer or delivered or some variation of that. And that always is going to imply then that there was atonement.
Hmm. Hmm.
So God
I
doesn't,
guess one other observation I had was, you look at it in terms of like Leviticus or Exodus, where it's these laws. So within that system of laws, here's how redemption happens, and so you can see as it's like this self-contained, like okay, everyone social contract, so to speak. Everyone kind of agrees this is how we do things, and this is how this law is everyone acknowledges is binding on all of us, and okay, this redemption is valid. But when God redeems his people out of Egypt, like I don't think Pharaoh felt like he was under the jurisdiction of God's law, so to speak, or acknowledged it. And but God simply is essentially he's imposing his law on, demonstrating his sovereignty and rulership over all of creation by using this redemption language and saying, look, I just redeemed my people, as in according to the law. So I found it interesting that it was is you know that that God used that same phrase as in like a legal redemption, but it was he, like I said, it, he wasn't operating according to any law that the Pharaoh recognized.
yeah, right. And I was thinking the particular, I was thinking about the particular question of does God just deliver them? But he doesn't just deliver them, right?
Yeah.
There's the necessary symbolic act of the Passover lamb that that has to be accomplished before they can be
Mhm.
delivered, right? So it's the atonement picture,
Well, in the immediate one is obviously all the firstborn that were not passed over,
right?
um, was sort of the proximate price, so to speak. But
Hmm.
obviously, um, Christ was the ultimate price that was paid in order to redeem his people out of Egypt.
Yeah, yeah. So I was thinking about the what you were saying, Mike, about this kind of written into the laws. It's also written into the you might call it the law of human nature, right? The constitution of the human person by creation.
Hmm.
Whereas, and what we see it out there in the world, it's we see people struggling with guilt, right?
Hmm.
Why would they struggle with guilt? They struggle with guilt because they feel like they owe something to make up for something that they've done or failed to do.
Hmm.
So they have sinned, they have created a debt, and they feel like they need to pay it. And
Hmm.
that's basically what guilt is. But do you see
Mhm.
how that's related to the whole idea of redemption and atonement,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
the gospel message is designed by God to appeal to people who are struggling with guilt.
Hmm.
Because you
Yeah.
can say, yes, something has to be paid, and it would be your life, but
Hmm.
God has arranged that Jesus pay for you if you just
Hmm.
come to him in faith,
Hmm.
right? That's the
Not
gospel. Yeah.
not to sidetrack too much, but that just reminds me too of like those who claim that morality is just like a construct, the human construct, and we just came up with it because it's useful to, maintain order, blah blah blah. Like that is the example you just gave is what disproves that. You can't like con like a person who has done something like that, let's say somebody who's like not really, they're not really, um, they don't regret doing something they did, they benefited from it, and they want to just forget it and move on, right?
Hmm.
And but this thing they did haunts them, and they can't let it go, and they can't get rid of the guilt that they feel from it, even though they want to, right?
Hmm.
So if morality was just a construct, then you could just agree with yourself that you don't care about that anymore. And but it's not. It's like it's part of our, like you said, it's the like the law of creation. Like
Hmm.
we can't avoid it.
Yeah. So it's thinking about God, how God has arranged atonement, redemption, deliverance, and what that means about gospel presentations. I think is a really helpful thing. Not just to think about it as existentially, how does this affect me, and what should I praise God for because of the great redemption that I have, but what does this mean in regard to other people, and how has God set this up so that there's a talking point with the unbeliever?
Mm.
That talking point is the problem of sin, right? That's
Hmm.
the thing that everybody has in common. Is the and when you're all apologetics, uh, all evangelism is always looking for common ground, and often
Hmm.
they find common ground in the wrong place. The place that is common to every person is we're all created in the image of God. We are all sinners. That's the common ground, and so sin itself is uh, and the guilt that that produces is everybody feels that,
Mm.
and so
I
you
think
can.
like R.C. Sproul, I remember a quote from him talking to somebody, like a secular person, and he asked them, "What do you do with your guilt?"
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
great question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
a lot of people, the answer is I don't think about it. They suppress it,
Hmm.
they push it down. It doesn't go away. The fact that you don't think about it doesn't mean it's not real. Um, yeah. All right. So to continue with Job, well, continue in the subject of the Redeemer. So according to the definition or the passages that we read, and then the definition you can infer from those passages, the Redeemer must be, a relative or an owner, right? And God owns all things.
Mm.
Um, he can redeem, or kinsman redeemer. And so it turns out that in Christ, this is one of the reasons for why does Christ have to become a man? So he can be the kinsman redeemer. This would be one
Mm.
of the reasons. Because God has set it up that your kinsman can redeem you. But you can't be redeemed by the blood of animals, right? They're lower
Right.
creation than you. So they can't atone. Um, so Job has a concept then, obviously he has a concept of belonging to the Lord, but I think he also has a concept of this Redeemer is going to be kin to him. He's going to be
Mm.
related to him, right?
Mm.
And so I wanted to look at a couple of passages where it talks about why it's important to have a Redeemer who is related to you. So Hebrews 2, 5 to 18 is a good place to look at that. And Mike, could you read that? Hebrews 2, 5 to
Sure,
18. You can pick whatever translation you want.
sure. I guess I'll go with uh, guess I'll go with NIV. It is not to angels that he has subjected the world to come, about which we are speaking, but there is a place where someone has testified, "What is mankind that you are mindful of them, the Son of Man that you care for him? You are made a little lower than the angels. You crowned them with glory and honor and put everything under their feet. In putting everything under them, God left nothing that is not subject to them. Yet at present we do not see everything subject to them. But we do see Jesus, who was made lower than the angels for a little while, now crowned with glory and honor, because he suffered death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone." In bringing many sons and daughters to glory, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through what he suffered. But the one who makes people holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. He says, I will declare your name to my brothers and sisters. In the assembly, I will sing your praises. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, he says, here am I and the children God has given me. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is, the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. For surely it is not angels he helps, but Abraham's descendants. For this reason he had to be made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted.
Thank you. So I'm sure you noticed the atonement right there.
Mm.
So it's talking about redemption, atonement, deliverance.
Mhm.
The point of the passage, I think, is summed up in verse 11. The main thesis: the one who makes people holy and those who are made holy are of the same family.
Mm.
He doesn't state this as a new truth. This is a observation based on the role of the high priest. He's speaking of the high priest, and we know that because of the whole context in Hebrews 2. And you can see that at the end of the chapter in verse 17, right? For this reason, he had to be made like them, or like his brothers, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. This is parallel with he has to be related to you so he can make you holy.
Mm.
And so if the high priest in God's design is a picture of Christ, which he is in God's design, then Christ has to become incarnate, because the high priest is related to the people he serves and makes atonement for them on their behalf. And Christ, if he's going to do that, he also has to be related to them. So the atonement is prefigured in these shadows, right, in these pictures. And the writer of the Hebrews brings that out. And he says that the reason that Christ has to become like one of his brothers, like human, he has to become human, is so that he can make atonement, so he can fulfill his role as high priest. So, so Job, I think, has some inkling of this when he's thinking of the Redeemer. And he's not he's not completely other. He's like him. You know, he's already said that in chapter 16. He says he's a friend. He's like one man who intercedes for another man. He's like my friend, right? So he's thinking in terms of, it's a really interesting question to me. The Old Testament saints, what did they know? How did they know it? And I think it could be, I think that Job knows so much more about the Redeemer than is usually given him credit. I think that it easy to make an argument that he knows pretty much everything except for the name of the Redeemer. He doesn't know he's going to die on a cross, but he knows that he will come and he will redeem him, buy him back by paying a price that will cover his sin, and that will restore his relationship with God, and that the Redeemer and God are somehow the same, that they're equated ontologically, that the Redeemer is God, but he's also
Mm.
going to be man. He's also going to be like a son of man, Job calls him. He's going to call him a
Mm.
son of man. And so he knows, he has some inkling of the hypostatic union, the incarnation,
Mm.
the plurality in the Godhead. He's got all of these things kind of as assumptions in the things that he says. And he
Mm.
knows the Redeemer will be his kin, because that's what it is to be a Redeemer, to be
Mm.
kin. So, so,
Yeah,
so
I guess the
Hebrews,
way I
yeah,
get that out of Job is, it's, I think you're right that obviously Job, it's way back before a lot of the revelation would have made it easier for him to put into words what he knew, right?
Mhm.
So it's almost like obliquely we have to look at what he's saying and to understand that, yeah, he basically got it. And um, I guess the way I see that is, the book opens up with him doing sacrifices for his family, right?
Right.
Um, so he understood that, but then there's so much in all of his struggles where his main point is that like God needs to take care of this. He talks about, his friends are trying to describe, oh, this is what you can do, and you just do this, um and Job responds about how like futile that his anything he can do is, and that this is all the work of God. So I think that, connecting those dots, he realizes that what's happening in a sacrifice and what he can do, but he also realizes sort of the limits of what he can do. And so I think there's like the connection is that he, in some level, ultimately understands that God is going to have to do this redemption himself in some way.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that comes across pretty clearly. If I think we've seen it, right, multiple times. And yeah, I think that Job's faith is very similar to the faith that we have, except we know the name of the Redeemer and we know the specifics of
Mm,
his work. But as far as his hope in the forgiveness of sins and restoration to God, it's exactly the same
mm,
as ours. So I think that's true of the Old Testament saints in general. That Job might be harder to show because he's so early, but you can show it with Abraham,
mm,
obviously, right? If Abraham is the father of the faithful, that means that our faith and Abraham's faith share more continuities than they do discontinuities.
mm.
So, um,
It's quite a contrast reading some passages of Job and then reading Hebrews,
mhm.
um, because like the veil with Hebrews, the veil has been lifted to such an extent. You're reading this revelation that is just so clear and kind of it sort of finally explains all of the gradual revelation that's been happening in such clear, concise words. And then you look back in Job and it's very veiled, but it's the same thing.
Yeah. I think what's happening too with New Testament revelation, using Hebrews 2 as an example, is that there are many strands of bits of Old Testament revelation that are drawn together in the Hebrews 2 passage, not just
Mm,
quotations from other parts of the books, but even the idea that the Redeemer is a kinsman, that comes from the high priest. And
hmm
Job has also articulated that idea, but not very clearly, but it comes very clearly in the high priest idea.
hmm
And so when you read it in Hebrews, what you're getting is, kind of a focused concentration of all these disparate parts that have been gathered together that were not in conflict or irrelevant to each other in the Old Testament, but were not gathered together in a systematic way.
mm,
So, so I think that that's also what's going on, right? It's
mm,
like you look at the Old Testament, you see a prism. It's like looking through a prism and trying to put little parts together. But you're looking at Hebrews, and it's like, oh, here he's got them all laid out in the right
mm,
order, right?
hmm
Something like that. So in Hebrews, the author quotes from Psalm 22 and also Isaiah 8. And I just wanted to briefly look at those. So Psalm 22:22, he quotes, ESV says, I will tell of your name to my brothers in the midst of the congregation. I will praise you. The writer to the Hebrews is saying that the Redeemer is quoting this. Jesus quotes this in the uh, I don't know if he actually said those things in his human ministry, but the writer of the Hebrews has the Son of God quoting them in the passage there and saying, I will tell of your name to my brothers. So, God, the Father, I will tell of your name to my brothers. In the midst of the congregation, I'll praise you. The import of that is that the Messiah is one of the congregation. And who is the congregation? What's the people of God? who are called Israel in the Old Testament. So he is an Israelite. And this is obviously supports the point that the writer in chapter 2 of Hebrews is making, that the Messiah must be human from among the Israelites. So he can be declared high priest. And so here he is substantiating that from this Old Testament passage, Psalm 22. And then in Isaiah 8, 17 and 18, this one is a really interesting quotation, I think. This is Isaiah speaking. I will wait for the Lord who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him. Behold, I and the children whom the Lord has given me are signs and portents in Israel from the Lord of hosts who dwells on Mount Zion. So the children, from the earlier parts of Isaiah were given symbolic names or names that were symbolic of other things. And they were basically giving the coming history that Isaiah was prophesying about. Those names signified what God was going to do. And but it's not those names that are in view here. What's in view here is that he is with the children, that he is with the children. And in the quotation in Hebrews, unless I've missed it, I believe he is putting these words, "Here I am, and the children God has given me," on the lips of the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
That the I there, who is Isaiah in Isaiah 8, is the Messiah. And so then what we see there, and I find it fascinating. I always find this aspect of all of these uses of the Old Testament to be informative, telling, fascinating. The thing that's fascinating to me is that he doesn't say, "Oh yeah, of course I'm assuming here that Isaiah is a type of Christ. Now let me explain to you why that's true." He doesn't anticipate anybody going, "Wait a minute, what did you just do? I mean, you just said Isaiah is a type of Christ. That's weird." Nobody does that. His anticipation is that nobody's going to do that. That this is fairly common knowledge. So I wonder about that. I think I see that and I go, that's not the way New Testament and Old Testament scholars read Isaiah. Don't read Isaiah the way that the writer of the Hebrews reads Isaiah.
I mean, hey, out of the gate, Hebrews 1:1, he explains that this is what I'm going to be doing. So
that's right. It's all about Jesus, right? And so I find it's interesting. I'll just say this just in case there was any question about it. When you come across a New Testament scholar who doesn't read the Bible the way the New Testament authors read the Bible, you should not take their word for anything. You just don't believe them. But it's true that many New Testament and Old Testament scholars do not read Isaiah the way that the author to the Hebrews is reading Isaiah right here. He's saying Isaiah is a type, a picture of Jesus, and the children that God has given him are the congregation of the people of God. So it's very interesting usage there. Something to think about when you look at the prophets. And we already know a lot of the prophets all of the prophets really do picture Jesus. He is our prophet. And so the prophets in some way always are a picture of him. But Isaiah, as a father with children, pictures Jesus. So.
Yeah, I mean, Isaiah even knew this at the time. Like the Hebrews is just acknowledging what Isaiah is already saying here, that we're prefiguring, we're representing, like we're representing what God is ultimately gonna bring. We're just a foreshadow of it, so to speak, by when he says, Lord, I and the children whom the Lord has given me are signs and portents in Israel.
Yeah, pictures of something else. Pictures future. Yeah, good point. So the last thing that I want to just real briefly, so Job, I think, knew or had an inkling that the Redeemer was related to him, and that has implications for thinking about how Job knew that, and we've talked about a little bit about that, but also that by the definition of Redeemer, the Redeemer is the owner. He could be the owner. And Job certainly knew that he belonged to the Lord, and he expected to be redeemed by the Lord. So there's no problem trying to establish that. But what I just want to show a couple of passages out of John where the Redeemer presents himself as the owner. So John 10:27, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them and they follow me. So Jesus presents himself not only as God here, because in the Old Testament, the shepherd of Israel is God. And he presents himself as the new David, the great shepherd of Israel, but he is also the owner, right? He's the shepherd who owns these sheep, and they know him and they follow him. And then John 17:6, Jesus says to the Father, I have manifested your name to the people whom you gave me. Ergo, he's the owner. People whom you gave me out of the world. Yours they were, you have given them to me, and they have kept your word. So not only is he kin and high priest, which the writer of the Hebrews brings that out of the Old Testament and applies that to Jesus too, not only are related to us, but he is our high priest, and he is the owner and master that we listen to and respond to. And these, being kin and being owner, are part of the definition of what the Redeemer is. So I thought it appropriate to kind of just bring them in here and say, Job is using this terminology, which is, by calling him the Redeemer, he's using terminology that gets fleshed out in the Old Testament, particularly in the time of Moses. And everything we think of, that we talked about today, I mean, it's very broad what the Redeemer does, but his relationship to who he redeems is one of family and one of ownership. And so this is those are just two different perspectives on the relationship that the Redeemer has with his people. And those come right out of the Old Testament descriptions of the Redeemer. And then those things are further then worked out in history by God in the Incarnation, and then developed more in the New Testament. So I've come to
Chuck?
the end of, yeah, Catherine. Yes.
If I may, I ask a very quick question. It's
Sure.
in chapter 16 of Job. It's
Okay.
verse 19. And Job is saying in verse 19 of chapter 16, even now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and my advocate is on high. Is it fair to acknowledge that verse with all that you've taught us about his Redeemer? Because it's Jesus, is it not?
It is. Yeah. And these are,
Okay.
yeah. And I think that it's appropriate to link them all together. Everything that Job says about his hope, and the person he hopes in, and the hope for vindication, and however he expresses it. But these are all Job talking about the same subject from maybe slightly different perspectives as the dialogue goes on. But he's never really changes who he's talking about. And so when he talks about the witness in heaven, who is going to argue his case like a son of man does with his neighbor, he's talking about the Messiah. He's talking about Jesus. And he doesn't know that word. He doesn't know Messiah, doesn't know that word. But that is nevertheless who he's talking about. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I thought, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Good question. All right. I'm going to turn off the recording.